Hey, what's up, man?
How's it going, buddy?
Shoot, it's going somewhere.
Heck yeah, man. Grinning and winning.
Grinning and win.
Heck.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Ah.
Oh, man. What's on your mind today?
Oh,
Like,
man. I've been thinking a lot about like how perspective is like a hell of a drug.
perspective.
Yeah. Like, like people individually, each one have their own perspective. Like,
That's true. Yeah, we each have our own unique way of looking at the world.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, the interesting thing about perspective is that we each have one. Like, and it's not just that it's unique. It's unique to our upbringing. It's unique to our physical makeup. It's
Mm-hmm.
unique to each individual aspect of our uniqueness.
Yeah, yeah. Perception is a very individualized thing.
Yeah. And the thing about like perspective is that each thing that you have a perspective about, like, okay, so let's use an example here.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I would say like an example of a perspective is you grew up in a, I don't know, like a farmish town. Like small
Okay.
town, everybody's a farming,
Mm-hmm.
like one school kind of situation.
Right. Everybody's on the football team.
Yeah. They have like so your perspective is going to be what we would, I don't know, what I would probably consider like a small town perspective. Like
Okay.
you would have a hard time judging something that was happening in like the inner city. See?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
your perspective would not include that of the inner city. See? Because people from the inner city's perspective on crime is going to be totally different than your perspective on crime being from a small town. Because
So
small town crime is very different as a whole. Sure, there are some that are exactly, some crimes are the same anywhere you go. But the way the crimes are committed, the like how, what crimes are committed, you'd have a hard time finding someone in the city that was like stealing a tractor.
Okay. So are we saying that everybody in a small town has the same perspective?
Oh no, every perspective is unique. But one of those perspectives would be a small town perspective, which would be like individualized for each one and what that means for each person that lives in the small town, what their perspective of a small town would be. See?
Okay.
So like let's say you love small town living. Then your perspective would be, oh, small town living's awesome and these are the reasons why I think that. Right? Whereas like if I was born and raised in a small town, but I was like I always just yearned to go to the city, or like all I can think about is going to college, so I'm gonna try and
all this big city, media, watching all
sure,
the
sure.
movies.
Or maybe you just feel like, oh, I'm trapped in a small town, I want to get out, and that's your perspective. You're like, like even though like Uncle Jim may have a great setup for farming, and he's all like, gymmed out, and he loves farm life. Whereas like you're like, I don't really care about like, about caring for farm animals. I don't really want to like wake up into poop.
No thanks.
Right.
Good on that.
I do not want to milk a cow. I'm not
No.
trying to like grab fresh eggs. You know where those things come from?
I have an idea.
Exactly. Like, fuck. Anyways, we were talking about perspective. Okay, so like one person's perspective in a small town may be that they do not actually like living there. So like even though we could consider it, oh, a small town this or a small town that, each person's perspective is going to be slightly different. And their perception is then going to be founded around that, like rose-colored glasses or jade-colored glasses.
Okay.
Like if you love farm living, then farm life or small town life, things that are about that life they're gonna come easier. You're gonna like them more just because you're gonna have a predilection because you've already judged town life to be awesome than anything around you're tongue tied. Anything around small town living, you're gonna have a predilection for liking it, versus if you don't like it, you're gonna have a predilection for anything surrounding that thing to be automatically disliked.
Sure. Yeah.
And that would be a perspective versus a perception. Your perception will be changed if your perspective is aligned,
Is a
or vice
perception
versa.
like the good and bad? Like, oh, I perceive this as good. I perceive this
That's
as bad.
that's almost like a value.
Oh,
It's like, oh,
okay.
good or bad, I value it, I don't value it, I like it, I don't like it. That's more of a value than like a
Where
perspective. That could be a perspective, but that's not really a perception. Like
yeah.
like if you're
Okay.
perceiving something,
Hmm.
then it's like coming into you. You're perceiving it like through your eyes or through your senses.
Oh, okay, okay. And then perspective is where you're looking at it from.
Yes, and your perspective
Got
is
it.
where you're looking out from yourself into the, void or whatnot.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
dear.
So perspective is like when you have like a small town perspective versus a large town or like a large city perspective,
Hmm.
then it's going to be very hard, say, to like vote on laws if you like are trying to do like statewide voting, but you're from Northern California, say, where they have mountain lions and bears and like, it's very, very green and sparsely populated for the most part. A large amount of it
Beautiful.
is national forests, see?
Hmm.
And then you have Southern California that's like, fucking the valley. It's like microchips, big cities everywhere,
Hmm.
And then
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
guys down in there trying to vote on, say, I don't know, not to like pick a hot button one, but one that pertains exactly is like gun laws.
Yeah,
See, like, because gun laws in the city
I see where you're going with this.
versus gun laws in the upper mountain ranges with
Right.
lots of woods
I
where you have to
need to
contend.
shoot the big thing that's trying to kill me
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
the
woods.
bears and the mountain lions and people having like guns on their hips makes much more sense because there's, but then people from the city would have the exact same perspective as like, oh, like, oh, well, I need guns for protection from like thugs or like robbery or any number of big city problems.
The big
But
thing
the
that's trying to kill
gun,
them as a person.
but the guns themselves,
Mhm.
see, like there's no real reason for someone in the city, say, to have a shotgun or a big high-powered rifle. That's
Yeah.
just kind of wild,
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're in say like in the sticks and there's mountain lions and shit and you have a shotgun across the back of your window in your pickup truck, that's going to be like that's going to make, what I'm saying? So it's going to be very hard for someone in the city to make the same kind of laws that they have or to vote on laws that they have, say, in the upper country, which it makes perspective, see, a heck of a thing. Because now you have all of these different people who are like voting the way they think is right
Right.
from their perspective, which is the way it should be.
And
which is the way it should be.
arguably, they are both right.
Correct. Exactly. And that actually leads us directly into how perspective. I'm sorry. Perspective is directly linked to truth. Our truth, because all truth is subjective, as well as perspective oriented.
Okay. Okay.
See? So like if you believe, say, something to be true, like, I don't know, geez, it's so hard not to pick things that are like direct,
obvious, like you can see it.
Like more like hot button issues.
Oh.
Just because those are the first thing that pop into my mind, but I'm not trying to like open a big can of worms.
Well, I could say like my perspective is that the bus is always cold when I get on there. Is that
Yeah, yeah. I
accurate?
mean, if you, yeah, like, because somebody else might say, oh, it's too hot, or someone else might say
Right.
it's too
Yeah, I was
cold.
trying to come up
Each
with
one of
something that
those
wasn't
are
inflammatory.
absolute truths, though.
Oh,
like those are truths to each one of those people, even though the perspective and the perceptions are different,
yeah.
and thus the individual people's truths are all true
Okay.
individually, and from their perspective, that guy who thinks it's too cold on the bus, it is. But also, it's not, because I over here think that it's plenty warm because I have a fur coat. You see? And I'm like, oh, well, it's actually a little bit too warm in here. So basically, the whole idea with that is like pleasant medium. What I'm trying to drive at here is that although your truth may be like, oh, nobody should roll around with like a big high caliber rifle, like in their truck or whatever, because who could need that, because you live in a city and you don't understand that, like out here, you want to be able to stop something that weighs, 400 pounds and, essentially is a VW, a Volkswagen Bug with fucking
Mm-hmm.
teeth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you're not even trying to shoot the animal. You're just trying to make a big enough boom to scare the shit out of them. So they're like, fuck, dude, I don't know what that was. I'm gonna run away.
It can be easy to kind of think that I found this truth that I believe is true,
Two
and,
plus two equals four.
and then I'm like, that's it forever.
Yeah,
Forever, it is always that. And I mean,
absolutely.
2 plus 2, for the most part, will always equal 4 unless we break the rules of math.
Exactly.
So there's certain things that are like always true, but then other things that change.
Yeah, exactly. See, you have what I would probably call like a constant truth,
Mm.
which I think would be not a truth, but actually called a fact. See? Because it's not a fact that, like, I can't say, oh, it's a fact that I feel sick. Because it's
Okay.
not. It's I truly feel sick. I can say, oh, I'm just feeling really sick right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a feeling. But a feeling can't be a fact.
Okay, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, a fact has got to be something that's like, up to this point in science, we can prove that this is this as far as we can tell.
Like the force of gravity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The theory of evolution, even though they call it a theory, blah, 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 learn to do some research, look it up, and you'll see that a theory is actually something that simply hasn't been fully disproven or cannot be fully proven. See? So it's like, oh, this is a theory because it's still kind of up for debate if you're willing to bring facts to the table. Not truth.
Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like when we're referring to like science, that's where we start with. Science is like axioms, things that we accept to be
Proven
true.
over time, things that we've taken a lot of time and energy and been able to replicate different scientific experimentations and nobody can prove that it's not true that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Therefore, it is the truth.
Yeah.
Also, though, it is a fact. See, because we can take that as true to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but then we can also look at it as like, oh, this is a scholarly fact.
So when I say that's true, what I'm really saying is I'm accepting that into my own scope of what I consider true.
Correct. Yes. Versus like, oh, I read recently that 2 plus 2 equals 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked some people about it and I did some research and it turns out indeed that this is a 4.
Quite the intensive research I must have taken.
Yes. Lots. You have no idea.
What have you been really thinking about with perspective?
Well, I mean, how everybody has one, and like we all have a tendency not to realize that other people have them too. And then we're just like, oh, this person believes this and therefore they are this. When indeed a perception or a personal truth is not necessarily something that is like people judge each other on it,
It's true. We really do.
So
I'm
like
party to
that judgment stuff and all those negative things, because we're always trying to like, oh, you believe in this, so you believe in, or so you belong in this place, or you think this, so you believe that, so you're like lesser, or and so like that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
As soon as we can realize and like self-actualize that we all have different perspectives and perceptions and truths, then we can talk about those and get closer as people, as a society, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's true. I don't, but I mean, I feel like it is. So I don't know, like, I can't say that there's like some kind of life-changing truth behind this. It's just more of like an interesting thing to talk about because like by realizing these things, by looking at them in like a more meta construct from like above, if you will, then you can see more moving parts than taking a stance and then like defending a point or whatever, because then you end up like not actually having any kind of conversation or growth. You end up just kind of stagnant and just like chanting the same thing that you heard on Facebook or on Twitter over and over again.
Right. And most people don't reference their sources.
Well, who cares?
Yeah. Unless the perspective that you're sharing is one that is damaging to the other people that are receiving it.
Well, I mean, I hear you for sure, but I'm not all about like nerfing the world.
Oh,
like the world is like a hard place, and if we didn't have all of these conveniences around us, like indoor plumbing and like police forces and like infrastructure, like power infrastructure and all of these amazing things, then like we just kind of take them for granted, and then we make mountains out of molehills.
True.
So like ultimately, like we'd be running from lions and bears.
If we didn't have those stuff.
Tigers. Yeah, we'd be like suffering from dysentery and like dying off in record numbers. So we wouldn't have any time or energy to argue about things like politics.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to argue about any of the things, not to say that they're not worth arguing about or more precisely talking about, having a conversation about. What I'm saying is that like
relevance.
Yeah.
It's not relevant.
Yeah, I mean, well, just that the importance of said things, they change. Like if you don't have food or you don't have water, suddenly someone talking nice to you is far less important. Right. Someone like, because that's the thing is like, without tough skin, you can't hear hard truths. And without hearing hard truths, it's really hard to grow. So like when I can't say to you what I feel like is my truth without you getting upset, then you could never hear my side, and thusly I'll never be able to hear your side. So neither one of us is going to be able to grow from that experience. See?
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it's less about like, oh, this is unimportant or this is important. It's more about like seeing that it's all relative, how important something is to what else is going on. And if there's more important things like, I don't know, the health of humans versus how someone feels emotionally about something is like, oh man, it's so hard. But for me, at least, my perspective, my perception is that if someone's starving to death over here, so that someone over here doesn't have to feel bad about like people starving to death over here, so they put up like almost like a wall, not physically, but like socially. Yeah. So now they don't have to see that. Up. And now all of a sudden, because nobody's talking and they're just blocking off this, the perspective is that, oh, there's no problem. To the people who are able to vote, to the people who are able to make the changes, that have the money and the time and the energy, that aren't taking up their entire day looking for food, looking for water, the base things to cover continued existence on the planet, being put, because those things are so important to those people in that moment, living, that the people who have no real worries about like their life continuing for the next little while because they have what they need, they have those people that have what they need. Those are the people who have the time and energy and resources to then make meaningful change to the people who can't do those things. See?
So the what I'm kind of gathering is our two hypothetical people. The one that's in, comfort. Their needs, their worries, their perspective is mostly relative to like their social status.
Yeah, their comfort, how they feel, all like more maybe. Like exactly. Whereas the people who are struggling every day to eat and that. Some people don't have enough food, don't have enough ability. They do their best to get what they need, but it's just not enough, There are plenty of people who that's true for.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard for the people who have to understand the people who do not have. And it's very difficult for the people who do not have to understand the people who do have. The problem, at least from my perspective, is that the haves and the have-nots don't ever really exchange any meaningful communications because they're in two different sides of society. They have such separate perspectives and realities that they very rarely can be influential to each other. See? And that's what we need. We need the ones on top to be influenced by the ones on the bottom, and the ones on the bottom to be influenced by the ones on the top, so that the whole system benefits. Compromise.
Okay. I see. So their perspectives are relative to each other, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they are almost opposite perspectives, which is why I kind of used them for an example.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, like
know?
the big city, small city one.
Exactly. It's pretty obvious, the line, and you can see it pretty easily without it being too hot button,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they're what I was thinking about with the person in the financial issues versus a person with literally starving issues, they probably value these needs at the same like level. Like the way that they feel about their situation is probably about the same, even though one is much more dire than the other. Would you say that's true?
No, actually, I would have to disagree with that.
Oh, I
Mainly
see.
because well, I mean, from personal experience, I know that when I'm hungry for a while, like I lived hand to mouth and lived outside for a while, and I'm not gonna lie, I've eaten a few meals out of a garbage can.
Oh, were they
Yeah.
good? Did they taste good?
Well, I mean, they were. I mean, I didn't get sick.
More than you can ask for, I think.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, this is again, we're actually discussing what we're talking about, which is nice, because the reality is that for me in that point in time, it was more important that I was consuming anything than to whether I was consuming something that was fresh or good for me. Like, that was not an important thing. You know what I'm saying? Where you can't say, oh, that's a similar perspective to someone who's like, oh, like these guys don't have a vegan option for my bucket, for on their menu, and so like now I'm upset. Those are two different kinds of upset over food.
Fair.
And the food availability. One is like, oh my God, I'm starving. The other is like, I'd rather not eat this because of my belief window. But like in a starving situation, you'll find that most people will like overcome their personal issues and eat weird shit. Starving on an island, you're probably going to eat some fish guts. Normally you wouldn't. Normally you wouldn't eat that baby crab. But today you're eating baby crab, because that's the difference between life and